Welcome back to Monitors Unboxed. Today we are putting 1440p 500Hz QD-OLED monitors to the test to see which one is worth your hard-earned cash. This is close to all the 500Hz QD-OLEDs on the market right now, or at least it's all the models I could obtain in time for putting this video together, so it's a pretty comprehensive look that will make your buying decision easier. Without spoiling too much of this video, the good news about 27-inch 1440p 500Hz QD-OLED monitors is that they all offer similar panel performance. This means there's no bad option that's going to give you highly inaccurate colors or poor motion performance, but there are some differences between the models, so let's explore the options in today's roundup. The MSI MAG272QPX50 is the entry-level 500Hz choice from MSI, if there's such a thing as an entry-level 500Hz monitor. I already reviewed this monitor on the channel last year, and it's got a decent feature set with all the stuff you need from a gaming monitor, but no major standout features. The main thing here is that you get the 500Hz QD-OLED panel at a reasonable price, usually around $700 US these days. MSI also offer a more premium configuration, the MPG271QRX50, and this name is a little confusing because it has a smaller number, 271 versus 272, but because it's MPG, not MAG, it's actually a higher tier product. Terrible naming scheme, but that's monitors for you. Anyway, the 271QRX50 adds in MSI's AI Care sensor, which is used for presence detection, and bumps the DisplayPort spec up from 1.4 to 2.1 UHBR20. These additions increase the price by $100, taking the overall MSRP up to $800 US. The Samsung Odyssey OLED G60SF is next up. I also reviewed this one last year. The standout features here are the sleek silver design, which differentiates itself from the usual black options, and the use of a matte screen coating. Pricing fluctuates a lot for this model, sitting anywhere between a reasonable $700 US and a ridiculous $1,000 US. Gigabyte also have a 500Hz QD-OLED offering, the Aorus FO27Q5P. This is a higher tier option with an interesting DisplayPort pass-through feature unique to this model. Not only do you get DisplayPort 2.1 UHBR20, but you also get a DisplayPort 1.4 out, allowing you to daisy chain multiple monitors together with a single input cable going to your PC or laptop. It's not as readily available in the US as the other options, but it is found in other regions like the US and Australia for similar prices to the other models. Lastly, in today's roundup, we have the Innocn GA27M1Q, which is the cheapest model I'm looking at today, available for just $660 US. The standout feature here, aside from the price, is the white design, and it seems to me that Innocn have taken some inspiration from the Samsung aesthetic. For most people, the main reason to buy a 500Hz QD-OLED monitor is its motion performance for fast-paced competitive games. The good news for buyers is that there's no difference in motion clarity between any of these options. All offer identical ultra-fast response times, all genuinely offer 500Hz of course, and this means the same fast, responsive, blur-free experience. These are great monitors for high frame rate gaming, and they all offer advantages over lower refresh rate options. And of course, being an OLED, we do get a sizable clarity advantage over similar or lower refresh rate LCD options. All five also offer essentially identical input lag, so the level of responsiveness is the same on all models. At 500Hz, these are all really quick displays, crushing the competition. Input lag at lower refresh rates is also the same, so at 60Hz the results were good for all options. Additionally, we get variable refresh rate support, which is compatible with all GPU brands. The MSI, Samsung, and Gigabyte models list FreeSync and G-Sync compatible support, but while the Innocn only lists FreeSync, it works just fine with G-Sync enabled on NVIDIA GPUs. One difference worth mentioning in the motion section is that the MSI and Gigabyte models offer black frame insertion built into the monitor's OSD features. MSI calls this mode MPRT, while Gigabyte call it Ultra Clear. These modes allow you to boost the clarity of lower refresh rates at the expense of flexibility, as they require fixed refresh rates to operate correctly. The main use case for this would be to make 240Hz gaming look more like 480Hz gaming if the game you're playing cannot be run at a high FPS, but you still want to benefit from the high refresh rate the monitor can offer. Using black frame insertion at 240Hz looks very similar to 480Hz in practice, but doesn't require the game to actually run at 480 FPS, so it's a potentially useful feature. The downsides to this implementation on both the MSI and Gigabyte monitors is that it's highly restrictive. Normally, you'd use variable refresh rates and not worry too much about in-game FPS. If it's 360 FPS at one moment and 330 FPS the next, no big deal. But when using BFI, you need a rock-solid, locked FPS and to disable variable refresh, so it's fiddly to get working right. And it only works at certain refresh rates like 240Hz, so while it could be a handy feature, it's not something I'd typically recommend most gamers use. Gigabyte also offer a unique feature called anti-flicker, which allows you to adjust the minimum refresh rate available while using VRR. QD-OLEDs are susceptible to flicker during high frame rate fluctuations, so benefit from stable frame rates and refresh rates. Raising the minimum refresh rate from 480Hz to 160Hz on the FO27Q5P reduces the possible difference in refresh rate during fluctuations, and this can help to minimize visible flicker. It's not a full solution, your mileage may vary, but it's an exclusive option on the Gigabyte model. One of the key ways each model differentiates itself is the selection of ports, and this could be a main factor in which option is most suitable for you. All models offer the full 1440p 500Hz experience across both their DisplayPort and HDMI connectors, so there's no crazy gotchas here, but other aspects are quite different. The MSI 271QR-X50 and the Gigabyte FO27Q5P both offer DisplayPort 2.1 instead of DisplayPort 1.4 and can be used at 10-bit 500Hz without DSC. This is not something that makes any practical or visible difference, but some people strongly dislike DSC for some reason, so DP 2.1 options are available. The Gigabyte model actually includes two ports, a full-size DP and a mini DP, both UHBR20 spec, so it has the best display input connectivity in that sense. The Innocn model also offers two display ports, but both are 1.4 spec. If you want USB-C connectivity, which is most useful hooking up to laptops and portable devices, that input is only found on the MSI and Gigabyte variants. The 271QR-X50 is the only model to offer power delivery over USB-C that's suitable for charging a laptop, giving you a single cable hookup. DisplayPort daisy chaining is only available on the Gigabyte model. Lastly, some options come with additional USB ports and KVM switch functionality. All models except the MSI 272QPX50 have a basic 2-port 5 gigabits per second USB hub. The 271QR-X50 and the FO27Q5P also have a KVM switch, which isn't found on the other models. All variants support firmware updates, though some models don't have any available firmware upgrades just yet. The strongest port selections are found on the MSI 271QR-X50 and the Gigabyte FO27Q5P, with the MSI offering better USB-C power delivery and the Gigabyte offering daisy chaining and an additional DisplayPort 2.1 input. The other models still offer decent connectivity though. I like how easy it is to access the ports on the Samsung and Innocn models, which have rear-facing connectors. The Gigabyte and Innocn models have built-in speakers as well. While all 5 models use the same Samsung display QD-OLED panel, so have identical resolution, size, subpixel structure, pixel density and text quality, you do have the choice between a glossy and matte screen coating. Most models use the standard QD-OLED glossy, but the Samsung G60SF has an additional matte layer applied on top. It's subjective as to which coating is better. Some people have really strong preferences either way, but here's a quick summary of the two options. The matte finish on the Samsung helps to reduce direct reflections, diffusing them on the surface of the screen instead of producing defined mirror-like reflections. This is particularly useful in bright environments where you don't have much control over light sources, like if you're using the monitor opposite a window. However, this benefit comes at the cost of coating grain, which reduces clarity and pop compared to the glossy finish. The glossy finish is clearer, and while direct reflections can be an issue, the standard QD-OLED glossy actually does a decent job of minimizing the impact of reflections. Glossy is usually better suited to darker environments or rooms where you have good control over light sources. What's important to note is that regardless of whether you choose glossy or matte, both options still have QD-OLED's ambient light reflectivity issue, which raises blacks in brighter environments and can make the screen look a bit grey. This is a known issue with QD-OLED and is found across all 500Hz models. Now let's look at SDR mode performance. All 5 models offer identical maximum brightness and all apply a uniform brightness configuration out of the box, so brightness doesn't change at different window sizes. I saw a variance of just 7 nits between the models, all around 300 nits, so no model is brighter than the others. Minimum brightness does vary a bit though. The Innocn can be turned down to just 11 nits, while the Samsung is limited to 63 nits minimum. All models offer the same color space coverage as well, which is 99.5% coverage of DCI-P3 and 82% coverage of Rec 2020. Out-of-the-box grayscale accuracy is pretty good on both the MSI MPG model and the Samsung model. The Gigabyte and MSI MAG model are a step behind, while the Innocn model features a cold color temperature by default, which hurts accuracy. Had the Innocn used a 6500K white point instead of 7500K, it would have performed a lot better here. But the Innocn has a surprise up its sleeve, which is that by default, it emulates a Rec. 709 or sRGB color space, while all the other models use their full wide gamut capabilities, even if the signal input is Rec. 709 SDR. This means the Innocn displays natural levels of saturation out of the box, while the Samsung, MSI, and Gigabyte models are all oversaturated. Some people prefer the more vivid look of full wide gamut QD-OLED, and you can easily get the Innocn to run in that configuration, but if you want natural skin tones, the way Innocn has configured their monitor is the best out of the box. All 5 models offer an sRGB mode. You get the most flexibility on the Samsung G60SF and Innocn GA27M1Q, which allow most other settings to be adjusted in the sRGB mode, so you can change things like white balance. The MSI and Gigabyte sRGB modes lock down the color configurations. In terms of performance, all 5 models offer similar grayscale results in the sRGB mode, being within 1.5 delta E's. The Innocn also performs well here as the sRGB mode changes to a near 6500K white point. In color checker, the Innocn performs the best, with the other 4 models grouped together offering similar performance. In this metric, I tend to class anything below a delta E ITP of 5 to be good factory calibration, and all 5 models meet that threshold, so there's no standout bad sRGB configurations here. There's also the option of using Windows Auto Color Management mode to get accurate natural SDR colors. However, for all 5 monitors, using the sRGB mode is more accurate, so I'd only recommend this configuration if you want to change OSD settings, particularly on the Gigabyte and MSI models. For our recommended settings, which can improve performance a little bit, we offer that to our Patreon members. In case you are wondering, all models have roughly the same power consumption, which makes sense as they all use the same panel and have the same brightness output. Shifting gears to look at HDR performance now, as we're talking about the same QD-OLED panel across the 5 options, we get the same black levels and per pixel control regardless of which model you choose. These are all highly suitable HDR displays with very similar performance. All 5 offer the 2 classic QD-OLED HDR configurations known as the True Black mode and the Peak 1000 mode, though the actual names used in each monitor OSD are different. Some models have additional modes, but the 2 basic configurations are used universally. If you're not familiar with the standard QD-OLED configurations, here's a quick summary. The True Black mode offers the best EOTF tracking, meaning it tries to produce the exact brightness the input signal wants in all scenes. However, it's capped to around 500 nits max, so you don't get especially bright highlights. The Peak 1000 mode uncaps brightness to the maximum 1000 nits that this QD-OLED panel can achieve, but EOTF tracking is typically less accurate. Performance in dark scenes is strong with good adherence to the brightness the content is requesting, but in bright scenes we run into a problem called panel dimming, where the entire screen nerfs brightness to around half of what it should be when the overall scene is bright. This is an inherent flaw to QD-OLED panels in this configuration that is seen across all 500Hz models and many other QD-OLEDs. All 5 models offer similar accuracy in their True Black 500 modes, nothing out of the ordinary here. Some models like the Innocn have slightly gentler roll-off, others have a harder flat line when max brightness is reached, but typically on-screen results are the same. And when viewing the Peak 1000 modes, again I saw very similar accuracy across all 5 monitors. The MSI MPG 271QR-X50 is probably the most accurate by a small margin across my usual tests, but it's not really enough to say, well, this model is accurate and the others are not. When gaming in the HDR mode, they all look very similar. As for other notable configurations, the Gigabyte model includes the HDR game mode, which boosts brightness in all scenes. This counteracts panel dimming in bright scenes, restoring the correct brightness, but makes dark scenes too bright. The MSI models include a dynamic version of this called EOTF Boost, which attempts to only produce boosted brightness in bright scenes, though in practice, this isn't an amazing fix because dynamic brightness changes are visible while gaming and that can be a bit distracting. I also found this mode to be less effective on the MPG variant than the MAG variant, though this could be due to the firmware being tested. Lastly, the Samsung model offers a configuration which is best described as a midpoint between the True Black and Peak 1000 configurations. On this monitor, the main setting to change is the peak brightness control. Setting this to medium limits brightness to 800 nits. You don't get as much panel dimming, but it's still there, and accuracy is a mixture of what is usually offered in the other regular modes. It's a reasonable option all things considered, though brightness purists will still want the peak brightness setting on high. As you'd probably expect from the results so far, brightness is very similar on all 5 models with nothing out of the ordinary. All 5 models top out at 1000 nits of peak brightness at a 2% window size, with 10% window brightness sitting between 510 and 550 nits depending on the display. This is in the peak 1000 configuration. In real scene brightness, all models produce very similar results with an average across our 8 tests of around 500 nits. There's a couple of outliers here and there, but on the whole, brightness is not a consideration when picking between these models. It's not possible to buy a brighter version of this panel. They're all display HDR True Black 500 certified and tuned to offer the same experience, and this also means we get the same color volume. OLED care features and warranties are important on QD-OLED monitors due to the risk of permanent burn-in. MSI, Samsung and Gigabyte all offer 3-year warranties that include burn-in coverage, which is the industry standard. However, Innocn only offer a 1-year warranty, which is extremely disappointing and puts them well behind the pack. I guess the lower price now makes a bit of sense. The monitor itself is cheaper, but you get less warranty coverage in return. When it comes to the built-in OLED care features, all 5 models have the basics like the panel refresh cycle, pixel shifting, and various dimming options. The MSI models have the most control. Not only can you disable some of these OLED care features, you can also set the level to which they apply. For example, if you want the screen to dim after showing static content for a period of time, you can control the level of dimming and how long it waits before dimming in the MSI OSD. In contrast, on the Gigabyte, you can only enable or disable static dimming. There's no control over the level or timing. The Gigabyte, though, does have a good set of options. It's just less than the MSI offers. The Innocn model is similar to the Gigabyte in what options you get, so again, pretty decent. Samsung offer essentially no control, only exposing the logo brightness feature, so you just have to accept how the screen manages burn-in. This is the worst way to approach it. However, at least Samsung still give you a 3-year warranty. In addition to MSI offering the best OLED care customization, the 271QR-X50 specifically offers a presence detection camera called the AI Care Sensor, which can turn the display off when you're not sitting in front of it. This helps to prevent burn-in by not activating any of the pixels when you're not physically looking at the screen. Like I saw on their 360Hz ultrawide, the sensor either hooks up to Windows 11 and uses its presence detection feature, or it works entirely within the scaler without a Windows hookup. In my testing, it was relatively responsive and worked well, especially when used with Windows presence detection. However, I wouldn't describe this as a necessary feature. It's something nice to have and a bonus you get with MSI's more premium 500Hz offering. The last thing to discuss is the design and build quality. The aesthetics of each monitor are subjective, of course, and it's good to see a range of options available. The Gigabyte F027Q5P and MSI's range of models are black on both the exterior housing and stand, giving it a neutral appearance that fits in well with most setups. The F027Q5P and the 271QR-X50 include a small amount of RGB LED lighting, which really doesn't make much difference, while the 272QP-X50 emits RGB lighting entirely. For something different, the Samsung G60SF uses a silver design with a large circular RGB LED light on the rear. In my opinion, this is a much sleeker and more impressive design than MSI or Gigabyte offer. The overall build is thinner with less of a boxy look, the ports are more easily accessible on the rear, and the flat metal stand base looks great and maximizes desk space. Gigabyte's wide V-shaped stand in contrast is much larger for no real stability advantage, so the way Samsung approach things is definitely better. The Innocn design, well, it's mostly a copy of the Samsung design, which isn't a bad thing in my opinion, because if you're going to copy one of the other designs, the G60SF is probably a good option to copy. Innocn have changed some things though. Their iteration is actually white instead of silver, and the RGB LED light ring is integrated in a simpler way. It retains the easy to access ports on the rear and the sleek overall design. Aside from the visual aspects, I would say the Samsung model has the best build quality, combining metals and plastics throughout the build. The Gigabyte and MSI models are also well built, but largely use plastic for the central box on the rear. I think the Gigabyte is a little better than the MSI here. The Innocn model is also good, but uses a more basic plastic for the outer construction, which doesn't look as nice as the Samsung, though it uses metal for the flat base. I wouldn't say the Innocn looks cheap, however it is rougher than the other models. All 5 options include a similar range of ergonomic controls, including height, tilt, swivel, and pivot support. At its maximum height, the Gigabyte model sits a couple of centimeters taller than the others, which is hardly a significant difference. All also use a directional toggle for controlling the OSD, and the basic feature sets on offer are largely similar. The Samsung model has a few more color control options, while the Gigabyte MSI and Innocn are stacked with gaming features. Of these inclusions, I don't feel there are any major standouts other than the options and settings I've talked about earlier in this roundup. So at the end of the day, there's a couple of questions remaining. The first is, which of the 1440p 500Hz QD-OLEDs is best and deserves your purchase? I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here because all 5 options I tested perform well and have decent feature sets. There's no bad models, there's nothing to avoid, so your choice is largely going to come down to some of the exclusive features on offer and the price. A couple of these models do have differentiating features that could swing you towards that model. If you want a matte screen coating, the Samsung G60SF is the best choice. If you want presence detection and good USB-C power delivery, the MSI 271QR X50 is the best choice. If you want DisplayPort daisy chaining and an anti-flicker feature, the Gigabyte F027Q5P is the best choice. And from an aesthetic standpoint, if you prefer a lighter design than a darker design, Samsung and Innocn have you covered. In terms of the overall best option, I'd give it jointly to the MSI 271QR X50 and the Gigabyte F027Q5P. I think the additional features on offer do have practical benefits for gamers, and with panel performance so similar between all 5 displays, it's the little things that count. However, both are on the more expensive end of the scale, usually costing about $100 more than the cheaper 500Hz options. These are good monitors, but I don't think the benefits they bring are worth a 15% price increase unless you definitely want a specific feature. With that in mind, I think most people are better off with one of the cheaper 500Hz models. The MSI MAG272QPX50 gets my pick here, as it's regularly $700 US, and I prefer the glossy finish personally over Samsung's matte coating. The Samsung model is occasionally the same price as the MSI, but it fluctuates a lot more, and it isn't clearly better. Of course, pricing may vary in your region, so a good rule of thumb based on these test results is to preference the cheapest model and then make sure it has the features you desire. All offer an excellent 500Hz HDR gaming experience. The one model I find harder to recommend is the Innocn GA27M1Q. It's actually a very good monitor that offers a similar experience to the others, and it's typically cheaper than the MSI 272QPX50, so why doesn't it get a strong recommendation? To me, it comes down to the warranty. MSI, Gigabyte and Samsung all offer 3-year burn-in warranties, but Innocn only offer a 1-year warranty. I don't think it's worth saving just $40 US compared to the MSI model to receive lesser support. Based on current prices, it's just 6% cheaper, so right now I'd go with the more established brand. If the gap in price was larger between MSI and Innocn, I'd lead more towards Innocn, but we're talking about premium monitors that cost at least $660 US. With these sorts of products, I expect premium levels of support. The second main question is whether you should purchase a 1440p 500Hz QD-OLED monitor at all. Is this the best choice on the market right now? The primary reason to get a high refresh rate QD-OLED is for competitive fast-paced gaming. If you're not going to utilize the upper end of the refresh rate, you'd be better off with a cheaper, lower refresh QD-OLED instead. 1440p 240Hz QD-OLEDs start around $500 US these days, and while they aren't as bright as these 500Hz models, the experience is broadly similar when gaming below 240 FPS. If you push frame rates into the 400 to 500 FPS range though, the experience from a 500Hz monitor is well worth it. There is a competing panel though for high refresh OLED gaming. The 540Hz tandem WOLED panel we've seen in a couple of monitors so far, including the Asus ROG Swift PG27AQ-WP-W. I think the tandem WOLED panel is better. You can check out my review of the Asus model to learn more, but in my opinion it offers a better glossy finish with deeper blacks in more environments, higher brightness in real-world HDR content, and a strong feature set including a unique 720Hz dual mode. However, this 540Hz tandem WOLED display is much more expensive, currently sitting at $1,100 US. That's a whopping $400 more than the MSI 272QPX50 I recommended for most buyers, which makes it really hard to justify if you just want a high quality, high refresh rate OLED for gaming. Price is one area where QD-OLED has a sizable advantage over WOLED, so again, I think for most people, a $700 QD-OLED like the MSI model is the best choice. So anyway, that's it for this one. Hopefully you've now got all the information that you need if you're interested in purchasing one of these high refresh rate OLED monitors. And there were a couple of displays that we tested in this roundup that we haven't made independent reviews for before. So yeah, lots of new and interesting data in this one. If you do want to support hardware unboxed and monitors unboxed, the best way to do that is via our Patreon. It takes a lot of time and effort to put together these videos, lots of testing, lots of analysis. So if you do want to support us, the best way is via Patreon. Links to that is in the description below. If you sign up, you get access to some pretty cool benefits. We've got the OSD settings that we recommend for all of these monitors, ICC profiles as well, Discord community if you want additional recommendations and that sort of thing, live streams, BTS, all sorts of good stuff. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.